David Saunders, 601 South Main Street. This project came before you in December for a public hearing, and the council members had a number of insightful comments about the project. There were concerns about the height. There were the desire to have some interaction between the existing residences that are in the project area on Buena Vista. There was the need to make sure the project was compatible with the neighborhood and the overall kind of master plan, and there were concerns expressed regarding parking. In the intervening time, the applicant has been able to address a number of these items, and a number of these items they've not been able to address, notwithstanding the lack of effort to do so. And so what we'd like to do is bring this back to the council. I see that Mr. Fox is absent tonight. It's an important project. It's important to the community, and I request that the council continue this matter to the first meeting in March, and we'll be able to give you an update on how we're doing on these issues, and the full council will be available then to raise issues and to hear where we are in the project. So the request tonight is for a continuance to the first meeting in March.
Joanne, what is the process? Because we're, or Dean, because we're really not at a project from a continuance standpoint, it's more a not denial. So are we doing a double negative? Because I know if the project were to come back again, it would have to be re-advertised and basically let them show what changes there are without necessarily starting back over again. So what would be the process?
Well, the direction that you provided at the last meeting was for staff to prepare the documentation necessary for a denial. So that's what's before you tonight. So you did not deny the project per se at the last meeting because you didn't have the documents necessary to do that, the findings necessary to do that. So you could continue the item. However, if they bring back any changes to the project or discussing any sort of changes to the project, you would have to re-advertise and start that process over again. Because you would need to take additional public testimony and the like, so you wouldn't you would have to begin that public participation process again. So I guess the long and the short of it is you're not precluded from continuing for further consideration and discussion, but if there's any changes other than just acting on these proposed denial documentations at a later meeting, if there's anything other than that, I believe you'd have to re-advertise the public hearing and start that public input process again.
Because I think we would not want to continue it without another public hearing if, in fact, there are changes. I don't know if there are no changes that it would get approved anyway. So I think it would have to be continued to something, but we don't necessarily have a date certain because it doesn't sound like they're prepared to know that they have everything done.
Right. You wouldn't be able to continue it, I believe, probably until the first meeting in March because you would have to re-advertise in that if you truly are reopening it. I don't think you could do it that quickly. So I guess what I'm saying is technically you have the legal ability to continue it and not act on these denials this evening. But depending upon what it is that they do with the project in the interim will dictate whether you're re-advertising and starting that process over again or just bringing these denial resolutions back.
Because I think if they bring back, at least in my mind, the same project without any changes, it probably wouldn't have a different outcome. But I think if we just continue it and then go ahead, would they then come back and ask to re-advertise it or take it to planning and ask then to go ahead and start that process?
I don't think they would ask. I don't think they'd have a choice, and Ms. Coletta can speak to this in terms of how the practicalities of the process would work. But if they did bring back changes that required further input, remember at this point your public hearing is closed, so you can't take additional testimony. They can't change the project. You have a closed public hearing. The record is closed on the project as it was presented at the last meeting. So you either act on that with what you have before you, or you reopen, or not even reopen, you'd have to re-advertise the public hearing to begin the input process to take the developer's changes and then hear public testimony with respect to what the impacts of those changes are and what people think about those changes.
May I respond to just a couple of quick issues? My request for the meeting in March was the first meeting that I assumed that Mr. Fox would be back and the rest of the council would be here. If we need to push that over to a following meeting in order to take care of noticing rules, that certainly would be acceptable to the applicant. And the applicant fully understands that whatever re-noticing or publication requirements are imposed are to be borne at the cost of the applicant. And so that's clearly understood. I don't want any misunderstanding from the council on that issue. But there were significant issues raised at the public hearing. There were significant issues raised by the public, and we've worked diligently on these issues, and we think the council, the entire council, would like to hear those issues and see if the project in a position where hopefully the council could see its way to approve it, and if not, it would go the other way.
Dean, coming back to you. So what would be the difference between us continuing it and then re-advertising it, as opposed to it's denied and they're then bringing it back? Or is that Joanne?
This light is green. Oh, there we go. Thank you. The light's green. It's not working. Joanne might be able to better answer that, but I mean, you would truly be beginning the process again, new application fees, starting the whole process all over again, as opposed to tweaking or making changes to the project that you then look at to see if there's additional environmental review that would have to be done and the like, and advertising a new public hearing to begin that process. So it's different in the sense that you would be starting with all new applications. It would be a new project application at that point. I don't know if did I miss anything on that?
And from the applicant...
That's correct.
Sorry.
That's correct. The final action that you take on these particular applications means those applications are closed. So to revisit a project on this property, you would have to come back and go through the whole process again with new applications.
Mr. Saunders,
Yeah, and I understand this kind of procedural quandary, but I'm not so sure it's as complicated as it first appears. We had issues raised by the council and the public. We have made a sincere attempt in the intervening weeks and will continue to do so to address these issues, and we think the council deserves to see an approved project. I don't think it's in anyone's interest to send us back to the drawing board in a new application. That doesn't make any sense. What makes sense, I believe, and the applicant believes, is to simply continue this matter for further review by the council. If it needs to go through a notification process that there's going to be some sort of review, that's certainly appropriate, and we understand that.
Do you think they would be willing to go, perhaps once they feel that they're complete, to bring it back to, say, infrastructure before bringing it back to the whole council, so that way we could at least look at it and kind of vet some of the issues?
Yeah, I'm sure that would be helpful. You know, if the council, if that's the will of the council, is that we have some input from the members of the council that sit on the infrastructure, as well as the members of the commission, planning commission, who sit on that, may be helpful as well. But at the end of the day, we're trying in good faith to address the issues that this council specifically raised, and sending it back to another entity may not be helpful. You may want to hear what our response is, and we may want to hear what your thoughts are on those responses. And ultimately, it may not be helpful to go to infrastructure, but if that's the direction of the council, we understand.
Mr. Scott?
Joanne, I know that we've heard about it being a senior facility, but at the same time we're hearing about additional traffic and parking and so forth. So would it be possible to also put a contingent on it that the age would be 65 and above as opposed to 55?
Is there such a thing?
Yes, there was a The conditions of approval did have a contingency on it to have a deed restriction and an agreement. The age limitation was 55 and older. We do have a complex, I believe we approved about 15 or 20 years ago, and I believe their age limit was 62 and older, so that is definitely a discussion that you can have and during the public review process so the applicant can engage in that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Karen? Yep. I don't like haphazard. I don't like close enough. I don't like, I don't like smearing. You think it might be better to start all over again? That way everybody would have notice, and everybody who is for the project could come and give testimony again. And people, give me one, and people who are against it could, and that way it's, it's once, it's done, it's neat, it's tidy, it's in one little package, and it's fair to all concerned.
I think I understand what your thinking is. I don't think it's inappropriate. In fact, I think it is appropriate for the council to continue this matter and to reopen the public hearing on it so that people can be heard. I think it's an absolute waste of the applicant's time and staff time for them to resubmit applications for this project with all of the necessary studies and all of the necessary applications and so forth. That does not add to these issues that you've raised, and it seems to me, frankly, an unnecessary and duplicative exercise. You've raised issues. There may be others that come up in the public hearing,
Yeah.
but I think ultimately the suggestion that I'd offer to the council is to continue the matter, reopen the public hearing so that you and the public and all of us can participate in this, in light of the council's concern, in light of the fact that all of the council members would be present at that subsequent meeting.
Okay, let me address one little thing, if I can. I think it was Councilman Scott who had issue with the height of the building.
Yes?
And wouldn't that preclude you coming back? Or do you think that would have to go to Joanne and her department to approve that?
Well,
and I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm not ever going to speak for Joanne. She does more than a good enough job for herself, and she may have her own thoughts on that. But the issue of adjusting the height of the building by grading and reducing the foundation grade of the structure is an easy thing to do from an engineering and architectural standpoint. And I'm not so sure that implicates significant city review of those conditions. The plans, of course, have to be reviewed by the planning department and so forth. And so at the end of the day, the council raised a number of legitimate concerns. We've worked hard to address those concerns, and we want you to know what we've done to address those concerns, and we think resolve a number of these issues. Some may be unresolvable, and we'll tell you what efforts we made to resolve those issues. But at the end of the day, we think we've made some progress. We think the community is served by hearing that progress. We'd like the action on this project, wherever it goes, to be heard by the entire council because it is an important project for everyone concerned. So my recommendation is we continue it and perhaps even renotice the public hearing. The applicant will pay for that, and we'll see what happens.
I am not necessarily opposed to continuing it, but what I would really suggest that, and I know in talking to one of the gentlemen, that there has been some effort to purchase some of the other properties and things like that, so I think that's great. But I think what's really going to be necessary is to really try to outreach again to the neighborhood even before it comes back here, because I think it would do you guys well to be able to have that done, to be able to have that input from the residents before bringing anything back even to a public hearing.
Well, and I recommended March as the earliest date if the council wanted to put it over to April, for example, just to give us time to do that. We'd certainly be fine with that.
Councilmember Montanez, just kind of feeding along with what you're thinking there. It might be beneficial, and I'm Not sure he's interested, but I'm going to mention his name. Maybe Oscar Ramiro, I believe your first name's Oscar, would be interested in being kind of a point person for the community. He lives right there. He's been very active and participated here, so he might be a direct contact there for them and for us.
Yeah, but he doesn't live on Buena Vista either, so I think, you know, we need to make sure and hear from the entire area around there too, so.
What I'd like to see is the suggestion of going back to infrastructure to see if it's bringing back for a denial again or to re-advertise for a public hearing. Oh, we'd have to that's 30 days, right, Joanne?
Yeah, what it sounds like is that if you continue this to March, even in March, the council would have to make a decision to reconsider the denial and ask staff to go back and re-advertise and bring the project forward. So I believe the way I'm understanding it is Mr. Saunders is asking that this recommendation for denial be continued until March, until they have more time to work with it. So you're not, again, not making a decision with respect to the denial. He's just asking that you put it off so they have more time to work with the public.
And I think that was a very good recommendation to go back to infrastructure. There's 2 of the 5 of us on that committee. They know our comments, and that way you can at least know if it's on the right track, whether to move forward. So I would recommend that it go to infrastructure, which is the first meeting, first Wednesday of March, and then bring it back to the second meeting in March to the full council.
Understood.
I'm having a challenge, Mr. Fuller, because we wrapped up the whole conversation, and if I open this up, everybody else is going to want to speak.